Before we start this video, I want to give a massive shout out to the patrons on the screen right now. You guys are truly awesome, and if anyone else wants to support me, I will leave the link in the video description. I've recently been watching a lot of smartphone reviews from the likes of MKBHD, LinusTechTips, Matthew Moniz, all these people. And I've noticed a lot of the reviews tend to cover the same kind of things, and that's just part of a review, you know. Most devices are pretty much the same unless you get one that's kind of faulty, and there are some differences here and there, but by and large, a smartphone is the same across pretty much all of its production line. And when it comes out to smartphone reviewers, well, they tend to cover the same kinds of things. It's very rare for these guys to have completely different experiences or to talk about completely different aspects of the smartphone, since there's usually one unique selling point. And I've kind of been doing some research of my own. I kind of posted a poll up on the community tab of my YouTube channel asking you guys if you played a lot of games on your smartphones. And I don't mean like Candy Crush or Words with Friends. I mean games that are actually going to make use of, let's say, a Snapdragon 845 or 855 in the modern smartphone. There are a lot of problems with reviews, and I'm going to be talking about that today. I'm not going to be talking about reviewers because, in my opinion, the reviewers aren't the problem. They're just covering what they can. It's a problem with the concept of a smartphone review, or even any kind of review at all, but in this video, specifically smartphone ones. Of course, the first thing is everyone has different needs. Of course, we've got the groups of people, like the groups of gamers, the groups of people who are kind of taking their smartphone just to work and they come back and they don't really do much on their smartphone because they're at work, or at least if they were doing their job properly. But there are some anomalies which I have written down. The first one is, and I couldn't believe this when I actually found out, a lot of people, specifically viewers of my channel, play video games on their smartphones not because it's just kind of an accessory game console, but because they don't have a console or a PC to start with. Now, this is something I'm very new to because back in my day, I'm only 19, what the hell? Back in my day, we didn't have smartphones. We just played on like a Nintendo Game Boy or a DS or something that we'd saved up, you know, several years to buy. So it's definitely not something that I'm used to smartphones being the primary game device, because I had like a, you know, when I turned 12 or 13, I had a small kind of phone, not a smartphone in any sense of the word, and I had my Game Boy, so there was kind of a difference there. Secondly, and this is something that only recently came to my attention actually, is that people take their smartphones out. Like, they go to work and they go to work for more than a day at a time. So they'll leave the house at, let's say, a Monday and come back on the Wednesday or even the Thursday, and they haven't got time to charge it. So this is something that I've really noticed. They don't do much on their smartphone, you know, they like the communication, so they need like maybe Messenger, and they'll use texts and calls, but what they really want is a long battery. And so when you're talking about smartphones that can really do 2-3 days at a time, it is difficult to comment on that because those scenarios are so rare that you don't do a lot on your smartphone, but you need it to last 2 or 3 days. I'm sure many smartphones could do that, but it's difficult for us to judge that since we're always using them for the likes of social media. Thirdly is the use of ports. Now, I know a lot of people really care about the headphone port, but I'm not necessarily talking about that, although that is a big factor. There's USB-C. There's micro USB. You might be in a sort of an environment where lots of people have micro USB, lots of people have Lightning, Type-C, and there are some proprietary connectors out there, I know. But the thing is, if you're in that universe and you kind of want a new smartphone that has micro B, or you want an Android device that has Lightning, like, that's not really possible. But it is something that people kind of want. So when you talk about ports, it's not necessarily USB-C all the things, as a certain Marquez Brownlee says, but I think it's more of just a generalized port. We want USB-C to be like the standard across every single device, but right now it's not. So there isn't really, apart from the fact it's reversible and maybe the speeds, there isn't really a unique selling point to that port other than it's modern and it looks cool. Then of course there are the subjective things in a smartphone, such as the notch, the hole punch, the bezels in general. A lot of people really want that Mi Mix 3, that Oppo Find X kind of zero bezels, well, relatively zero chin, no hole punch, no notch. That would be ideal for a lot of people, but for a lot of other people, that's not ideal. For me, for instance, I'm not a huge fan of the minimal bezels. I think it kind of looks okay, but it also looks kind of boring. Like, it's one of those things where we look into the future and we think, in the future, in 5 years, we're not going to have any bezels. But in a lot of cases, bezels are really helpful. For example, with ergonomics, if you're holding your phone landscape, as long as you hold, you know, some people hold it different ways and they want their thumbs on the front. And with really small bezels, Well, that's not really going to happen because you're just going to touch the screen accidentally. And a lot of this comes down to edges, such as Samsung's S6 Edge, S7 Edge, S8, S9. Obviously the new smartphones do that. I think the LG V30 does that, and we've got the Mate 20 Pro that does that as well. Now, it does look good because it gives the illusion of smaller bezels, and that can look good. But functionally, a curved edge doesn't really work incredibly well in terms of phantom touches and the way the display interacts with your hand when you're holding it. If you're holding it like a normal person, you're probably going to get some kind of phantom touches here and there, and if you've got a case it does help, but guys, we don't want to have to put a case on our phone for it to be functional. For example, I think the OnePlus 5 is a great phone to use in 2019, but a lot of people look at that and they see the big chin, the big forehead, they don't like that. So it's difficult for me to comment on something that's subjective because I can give my explanation of why I think it's good, but you probably don't want that, and I can't replicate your opinions. I can empathize with you and say, yes, I can understand why you would want it that way, but you're never going to please everyone. And if you give comments on that, which is basically what a review is, you're going to run into people who just don't want that kind of thing on their smartphone. And the same with hole punches. A lot of people really like the new hole punch stuff. It's going with the Samsung S10, the Honor Views, and pretty much all of the new smartphones are, I believe, leaning towards that kind of technology. I'm not a huge fan of it because it's not symmetrical. I actually prefer a notch because it sits in the middle of the display, whereas the hole punch tends to be, from the examples we've seen, up in the top right or top left corner, and I don't really like that. It doesn't sit well with me. But again, that's something that is very subjective. You couldn't objectively say that a hole punch is better than a notch because, well, depending on the size of the notch, of course, because a hole punch is essentially taking up the same kind of space as a small notch, such as the one found in the Essential phone. The only difference is it looks like it's floating, so it's a subjective thing. Another big one, which a lot of people forget, is that different countries have different access to phones, they have different access to marketplaces, and fundamentally the value, and not just the currency and not just the numbers, but the value of the smartphone is worth different amounts in different places. Let's first talk about the access to stores. Here we have eBay, we have Gumtree, and we have Facebook Marketplace. Those are the three big sites. We also have some extra things like Pre-Loved, but especially where I live, Craigslist basically doesn't exist. In the used market, specifically in some areas of the United States, Craigslist is bigger than eBay. It's bigger than, well, Gumtree and all those other things, but we don't have access to that here. So again, it's difficult to comment because that's not part of our market. Of course, the different values in eBay and Gumtree, you know, the different kinds of fees that the sellers pay. So on Facebook Marketplace and Gumtree, where there are no selling fees, you might actually get a device for cheap, a lot cheaper than if you were to buy it from eBay, but purely because the eBay sellers have to have that little overhead so they can pay the fees. Otherwise, they're just going to get a bit of a loss. The availability of smartphones is a big thing as well. A lot of us over here, we never really had Oppo until just a couple of weeks ago, and Xiaomi the same, where all of the stuff would be launched in a different country, especially with Huawei in the US. This is a big thing at the moment. It's going to be launched in a different country. We have to import it, we have to pay import fees. And in a lot of countries, especially in the East, you guys are going to get the smartphones well before us. And it's not the same with, let's say, Apple or Samsung, because those tend to be very Western-based companies in terms of how they spread out their market share. But something like Xiaomi, Oppo, and all those kind of companies, they're going to be kind of catering towards the Eastern market. We want a slice of that cake too, but we're not going to get that. We're not going to get that for another month, and we're going to probably have to pay a little bit of an import tax. Of course, there's always the used versus new markets. A lot of people like to buy new, and I absolutely understand why you want to buy new. You don't want something that's been touched by someone else, and you want to have that warranty, that fresh feeling of unboxing a brand new smartphone. There's nothing like it. And well, some of us don't have that kind of luxury, and we have to buy used, which is fine because I think buying used is honestly an incredible thing to do. Of course, you save money. You usually are saving the planet because you're not just throwing something in the bin, you're giving it to someone else and giving it a new lease of life. And some older phones, specifically for me, are really interesting. And then there's, of course, the situation, the circumstances of the buyer, of the viewer. Of course, there's the financial situation. Are you someone who has limited money and shouldn't really be spending £1,000 on a smartphone, but you're going to anyway? Like, that's something we can't comment on. Is this £1,000 smartphone going to last you another 10 years if that's your idea? Well, we don't know because we haven't tested it for that long. You might be someone who's not very tech savvy. Basically, all of my subscribers are tech savvy, so I would understand if you kind of didn't think this was a relevant comment, but it is. A lot of people look for reviews on a smartphone. Let's say they have an iMac at home and they have an Apple HomePod, but they want the Huawei experience, maybe for its kind of larger battery or its wider camera. Like, there are several different things you might want the Huawei for, and I'm not going to go into that right now, but maybe they're not very tech savvy and they pick the Huawei only to realize that it doesn't necessarily fit as seamlessly as their old iPhone 5 did with the Apple ecosystem. And it could be the same for if you use a lot of Google applications and you have a Google Smart Home and stuff like that, but you're actually using an iPhone. Like, we can't really comment on those things because we'd just be here forever if we explained every little part of the ecosystem. And then there's, of course, the past experiences with a smartphone or a smartphone company. Let's say you owned a Nokia phone for years and then you bought one of their kind of, I don't want to say terrible, but let's say underwhelming Nokia Lumia series that was running Windows Phone 8, Windows Phone 8.1 and Windows Phone 10. And then you went to buy the Nokia 7 Plus or 7.1, but you didn't want to buy it because you didn't have a good experience with that previous line of smartphones. Now, one of the big things is they're actually owned by different companies now, so they're doing different things, they're manufacturing in different ways, and obviously Nokia now is doing far better than it did before. The information is very subjective, anecdotal. You could go to a GSM Arena page or a Carphone warehouse or any kind of manufacturer or store, and you could look up the spec sheet. A review isn't meant to be a spec sheet because that's what a spec sheet is for. What it's really about, it's about a collection of anecdotal evidence, a collection of thoughts, of theories, and maybe of recommendations put into a video, but it's information at the end of the day. It's not like you have to buy the smartphone because of this. A lot of the time, a reviewer will give an opinion whether you should buy it or skip it, and I think that's probably a good way to go because for the majority of people, it is very useful to have that kind of should I, shouldn't I? But for some people out there, they take it very literally, and so when I say you should go and buy the iPhone 6s because I think it's a good used iPhone, a lot of you out there will go, oh, okay, he's got a good point because it's a decent iPhone, it's cheap. But some of you out there will go, no, I shouldn't buy an iPhone 6s, it's old. Like, why are you telling everyone to buy this? I'm not, I'm just giving some kind of recommendation. It's a guide, a rough guide. It's not meant to be like, go out there and buy this smartphone now. It's usually from one person's use case. I put out these smartphone reviews. Actually, a lot of the time I will get thoughts from the user of the smartphone because I tend to borrow smartphones from my friends, which I'm very thankful for, but it's nice to get a collection of thoughts. Most reviews, including mine, actually only have my perspective. Maybe I'll look up some stuff to do with like what other users think about the smartphone, but most of the time it's from one person. So that's only a sample size of one. When you're looking to buy something online, doesn't matter if it's a phone or not, I think you should go on and look at a review from several different perspectives. Maybe someone in one country, someone in another, someone with a different perspective on things. Maybe they look at it from a hardware point of view, software point of view, just so many different opinions, because then you can build up a kind of image of what that device is. It's not just one person's say so. And finally, of course, there's the reviewer's expectations. And in my opinion, it's very difficult to balance this because I personally review a lot of used smartphones. So I'm kind of used to a certain way of reviewing things. I compare them to kind of mid-range smartphones in 2019, but I'm also not going to kind of give every single smartphone praise because I think that's silly. My expectations might be a decent screen, a decent camera, and a decent battery, and some people might think, well, I don't really care about that. I kind of want a design that looks good. There are several different expectations when it comes to smartphone reviewers, and mine are kind of set in stone. I think a Galaxy S4 is about as good as it gets in terms of a baseline. And then there's the biggest thing that I need to talk about. That is the people who watch the smartphone reviews, you guys. There are a lot of you out there who watch a smartphone review or watch any review because you're going to buy the product. So for example, you want to buy an iPhone 7, but you're not sure if it's good in 2019, you'll go and watch mine, Simple Alpacas, 91 Tech, you'll just watch all of our kind of reviews on the iPhone 7 in 2019, and then you'll make a decision. But a lot of people don't actually, and more people than you might expect, in fact a majority of viewers, aren't people who are going to buy the phone. They're people who have bought the phone, whether it's in the past week or the past year, and they're trying to feel good about their purchase. So they'll watch the review just to be like, oh, did I make a good decision? but in the back of their head, they are in the mentality that they're defending themselves. So maybe they'll watch a review of an iPhone 7 and they paid $300 for it, and everyone's saying, maybe it's not amazing for $300, you've got like a better option here, a better option there. They'll go into the comment section of that video and absolutely tear you down. Not because you made a bad review, but because they don't agree with you or you don't agree with them, and they want to make themselves feel better. This is something that a lot of tech reviewers, especially smartphone reviewers, where there are huge audiences and huge groups of fanboys, that's where we kind of slip up a bit. Because okay, we don't make the best content on the planet, but I think we do some pretty informative stuff. And when someone is only coming to kind of hit you down, not because your content is bad, but because they want to make themselves feel better about a certain purchase, it doesn't bode well in terms of the whole comment section, because then you've got loads of people in there giving you criticism in ways that don't really make any sense. Right, it's 2:30 AM and I need to go to the gym now, so I'm going to leave this video here. But if you could leave any of your thoughts and opinions in the comments, that would really help me out, because I want to know what you guys think of this. Obviously my opinion is my opinion, again, like I talked about in this video, it's just one person's opinion, but I want to hear your thoughts on it. Maybe you agree with the people who just blatantly go out there and give hate, or maybe you're one of those people who just go out there and look for information, because that is useful. Anyway guys, that's been it from me. Thank you all so much for watching. Please do like, dislike, comment and subscribe if you're new around here, and most video like this one. Also check out my social media and Discord links and patrons will be in the video description below. Thank you all so much for watching. My name is Ryan Thomas for Fail Tech, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.